beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So we're coming at you a little bit later than normal.
Emma has been
I was on the
ill.
verge of death.
No, she was not. She was just ill. Emma and spring do not mix.
Plus, also, just being around large crowds of people always caused me to get sick. So I blame St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, well, you love to blame something on yourself.
I think it probably was St. Patrick's Day because we were around so many people. Anyways, I had a virus, had a fever for a few days.
She
was
took-
not up to it.
For those that know Emma personally, she took 3 days off of work.
I don't do that.
Like, she doesn't take days off of work, so, yeah, she was
It was
pathetic.
down to the count.
She was pathetic.
I even took a nap before the race actually happened, and then woke up with a fever, was absolutely miserable, but was so excited to watch it, and it was a crazy one.
I mean, from the get-go, the weekend started off insane.
It did.
And
it just kept getting better.
Yeah, it just, I feel like, I mean, I don't know if people really felt it was boring this weekend. I don't think it was.
There were people who said it was boring.
I mean, I think...
I'm gonna have a hard disagree with that one.
I think from a battle standpoint, I do understand where people are getting frustrated because it does feel like there aren't as many, these crazy, moments. But also, again, the sport has changed. Safety has changed. Yeah. But, I mean, between Williams, Haas, Red Bull, I feel like...
It was crazy.
I feel like the only team... I feel like Ferrari and McLaren were just, everyone else was falling and descending into chaos, and McLaren and Ferrari just drove through the carnage.
Oh, 100%.
So I definitely think there was just so much.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah, a lot.
So we are a week late. I'm sure you've seen all of the other podcasts about the Aussie GP.
We still want to talk about it, though.
But yeah, we're doing a full season, people.
Yeah.
We are not going to skimp out.
We are still going to do another episode after this. Not today. We're going to film it tomorrow. Get ready for the Japanese Grand Prix.
Because we have a weekend off.
Yeah. Which is good for our sleep schedule because I don't know if I could have done 2 weekends in a row of waking up at the crack of dawn. Well, actually, that's what we're going to have to do, I think, because Japan and China are one after another.
Yeah.
And I think China is at 3 o'clock in the morning for us. So that might be one that we don't watch live, that we watch the next morning. Because if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to screw up my sleep schedule that much.
Yeah, my circadian rhythm needs some consistency.
I really value my sleep.
Yeah.
So.
I like how we're saying this while we just sit at home and watch on our couch and then think of the teams. Those people are probably so confused by a certain point in the season.
That's very true.
They don't even know where the sun is.
But they also have been in that area of the world now, Australia, Japan,
yeah.
China. So their bodies are probably a bit more adjusted to it than ours are.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we're gonna do a normal episode. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
All right, MC, where are we? Do you want to go over it?
Yeah, so one thing I realized that I was doing that I didn't do for the first 2 tracks was give the name of the actual circuit. I don't know why I was not putting that. But anyways, so the official race name was the Formula 1 Rolex Australian Grand Prix 2024. Rolex, we're always looking for a sponsor. The track name was Albert Park Circuit. I thought it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
I watching it, I was like, I wish I was there now.
It looked like
this sold me on going to Melbourne.
It looked like, oh yeah. I never thought about as Americans when you think of Australia, you immediately think Sydney.
Yeah. Melbourne looks great.
Oh my god, beautiful.
I'll go.
Anyways, the first F1 Grand Prix was in 1996, and actually found this out listening to the pundits. The old tagline was "the best place for a race." I don't know why. I thought that was really cute.
I'm imagining it in an Australian accent too,
with a little kangaroo or a koala bear. The circuit length is 5.278 kilometers or 3.27 miles. So kind of I feel like middle of the pack
Yeah.
in terms of length. Number of laps is 58, and then the race distance, as we all know, falls around the same, 306.124 kilometers or 190.2 miles. So the lap record was set in 2023 by Checo, who is obviously for Red Bull, and he did a lap in 1 minute and 20 seconds, 20.235 to be exact.
Did they get broken this weekend?
I am realizing...
I think it did.
I need to double check in our, like, one
Well,
of our
yeah, so when
interludes.
MC takes these notes, it's before the race starts.
Yeah,
so the lap record is pre this race.
It's the prior record. I'm not gonna...
Yeah.
Yeah. I always like when, like, the records are still from, like, the 90s.
Oh,
Because
it's
I'm
really
like,
cool.
damn. Like, when is that gonna be broken?
Yeah.
There are 14 turns, and then this is, like, the DRS zones were a little bit different this weekend. So there were 2 detection zones, but 4 DRS zones. So DRS detection zone 1 is between turns 6 and 7, and then DRS zone 1 is between turns 8 and 9, so that's where it begins. And then the zone 2 is between 10 and 11. So if you look at a map, there's like 2 stretches of the DRS zones. I just think they're closer, so there was no point in having 4 detection zones. And then DRS detection zone 2 is between turns 12 and 13. And then the DRS zone 3 is between turn 14 and 1, so that start finish straight. And then DRS zone 4 is between turns 2 and 3. So a little bit different than we've seen because we typically see the detection zone and then the DRS zone. So yeah, I think this is the most areas of for DRS on a track that we've seen so far. But yeah, I thought, overall, I thought, like, the weather was impeccable.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was great weather. The Australians, man, they come out in full force.
Yeah, they also came out in full force for Logan Sargent. There were so many Aussie Logan fans, and I kind of loved it.
Yeah.
He needed it.
Yeah. Poor kid.
We'll get into that
a rough
later.
one. But yeah, I think overall... I've seen people kind of comment on how they feel like the Australian GP should be the opening GP.
I think I saw something that next year it's going to go back to the first one.
Yeah, I have to double check that, but I think if you look at, I think
last year was the first one.
But the first 2 races of the season this year had some pretty low spectator counts. I think it's hard to get to.
I do wonder if, because of the timing of everything, because of Ramadan, they had those 2 races first because they are Islamic countries. Like, I wonder if they had those 2 races first just because the Australian Grand Prix and the weekend beforehand and now is, like, dead in the center of Ramadan.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But definitely a big turnout, great vibes. I thought it was great. I don't know.
One of my favorites, actually. I really enjoyed it. Even though I was really tired, it really delivered.
Yeah, I think it gave us the oomph that we all needed.
Yes.
That I think we were kind of missing in the first 2 races. And don't get me wrong, there were some pretty spectacular things we saw in the first 2 races.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the chaos, like, we just wanted chaos, and we got a little bit of it.
With everyone being safe.
Yeah, no, like, I'm not looking for...
We don't want bad chaos.
No.
Good chaos.
But yeah, so that's Albert Park Circuit and our Aussie GP.
All right, we're going to get into the free practice sessions. So the free practice sessions started off rough.
Well, no. The first 40 minutes were great.
And then the last 20 minutes of FP1 were not great.
Yeah, so with about 20 minutes left, we saw Alex Albon go into the wall, stopping at turn 8 and causing a red flag.
Yeah, it looked like what happened to him seemed to be something that was happening to a lot of people. He kind of hit too much curb on, I think it was turn 7, and then ended up crashing right afterwards and just going into the wall. It was a good amount of damage, but it wasn't like... I mean, any crash could like seriously injure the driver, but watching it, like you could tell, like he was gonna be fine. He was gonna be okay. And so obviously, like his race engineers asked him, like, "Are you okay?" Blah blah blah. I can't remember. It was red flagged then.
It was red flagged.
And so everybody had to go in, and it was for a couple minutes. They had to clear everything off the track. And so that was really the main thing that happened in FP1, other than Lando topping the charts, which was great for me.
Yeah, we did see, not only was the turn that Alex spun out on difficult, we did see turn 9 and 10, which is a
Yes.
chicane. It really caused the drivers to struggle. Russell had a snap, Valtteri spun out, and
Max.
Alonso went into the gravel, and Max was struggling as well.
Yeah. Well, and so actually Max didn't go out immediately during FP2. He went out about 25 minutes into the session because he had damage to his floor because of all of the track limits issues he was having in FP1. So we didn't see him out there until the second half of the session.
Which is a great segue into FP2.
Yeah, and so in FP2, obviously Alex Albon is not driving because they have to take a look and see if they can repair the car. One thing to take note of, Williams was nervous that they weren't even going to be able to bring cars to preseason testing because they are running behind in the factory. And so they don't have a spare chassis right now, at least traveling with them because of
It's literally
the
being
slowdown.
built.
Yeah.
It's like, it's in their like, they are building it probably
Yeah.
as we speak.
And so they have to basically see if they can fix the car enough there
So
that
Alex
he can drive in it.
So Alex was out.
Yeah.
A big issue that we saw in FP2 was the wind. I know that sounds ridiculous, but also think these cars are carbon fiber. The wind was a huge factor. We saw Logan had an early spin due to wind. A lot of the drivers were talking
Yeah.
about how, and you could see. So that was a huge factor. Lewis did not have a great run. Just
Nothing really
Mercedes.
to add
Like,
there.
yeah, I don't know. So yeah. Following FP2.
We wake up the next morning to the news that Alex Albon, because we didn't watch, because FP1 was at like 8:30 at night for us on Thursday night. And then FP2 was at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
So yeah, so we watched FP2 as soon as we woke up.
And we wake up after watching FP2 and we see that Alex Albon will be taking Logan Sargent's car for the weekend. And the reason why they did this is because they don't have the ability, the car was so damaged that they didn't have the ability to actually repair it there. And they don't have a spare chassis, which a lot of the pundits were saying for an F1 team of this level.
Unacceptable.
It's unacceptable in modern times, which may or may not be true.
I think James has even commented.
Yeah, he
James
was like,
Vowles
it's
has even
inappropriate for us to
commented.
not have one.
But I think you also have to understand that Williams is a team that was struggling.
Yeah.
That it is
This is
a
the
team
second year of a new team principal.
of a rebuild.
Yeah.
So I have a few quotes just because this was such a like difficult decision and a lot of drama was put around Williams and kind of I'm a little over the pinning of drivers against each other, especially when they're teammates, but
Well, yeah, just before you get into the quotes, the thing is that people forget, yes, these drivers are individual athletes, but
Human
they are
beings.
on a team, and at the end of the day, a team like Williams is going to make the best decision for their team to get points because they need the money from a higher standing in the Constructors' Championship.
I think the other thing is too is, you know, how many of us have been on sports teams? How many of us have been benched or not put into something? You know, how many of us even, you know, from an arts perspective, how many of you tried out for a play and didn't get it? Like, I think the problem is that this is a business.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that these decisions are not done as a personal attack. It's literally down to the data.
Well, yeah.
It's down to the performance.
And that's the thing. People were like, this is like an attack on Logan.
They were like,
this is
horrible
gonna-
decision, but it makes sense.
There was some people that were like, this is going to ruin his confidence. And they're like, why did you re-sign him if you don't trust him to get the points? Statistically, Alex has outperformed Logan every single time, and he was the most likely to get points out of the two of them. And even if he didn't get points, he doesn't get points, but your standing where you for the teams that don't have points in the constructors championship, it's then like your place is based off of the actual like places that your drivers get. So Alex has placed the highest out of all of the teams that don't have any points. So therefore Williams is then placed the highest.
Well, I also think the other thing too is this is not the first time this has happened. Not to
Yeah.
Williams, but I mean Haas dealt with this in 2022. They had a car literally stuck in freaking customs. And then
I didn't know that.
in 2021, they literally crashed too many cars that they ran out of chassis.
Yeah.
So like I think people sitting here and being like, this is unacceptable, this is an embarrassment, like, this is tough, but, like, this is just, Williams is finding their footing.
Yeah. You go over the quotes.
James Vowles is quoted saying, and I got these from F1, like, F1 TV, like, they did, like, an interview. James Vowles is quoted saying, it's unacceptable in modern-day Formula One not to have a spare chassis, but it is a reflection of how behind we are in the winter period, and an illustration of why we need to go through significant change in order to get ourselves in a better position for the future. So, you know, he went on to state, every race counts when the midfield is tighter than ever, and that was his biggest push, was unfortunately, while this is a horrible decision that they had to come to, it is really, really important, the points right now.
Yeah.
Alex Albon stated, Logan has always been a consummate professional and a team player from day one, and this won't be an easy one for him to take. He went on to say his focus was now on the race and scoring points for the team. You know, he can't sit here while I'm sure as any level of teammate is probably a friend on some level. It's shitty. They were probably all upset about it. And then Logan was quoted stating, this has been the hardest moment I can remember in my career. I don't think this decision
It wasn't taken lightly.
You know, they assessed the car. The post-crash damage was too great. And again, the data was just there. You know, are you not going to put your number one driver? And I hate saying number one driver. I hate that. But it's just, I think statistically right now,
there are some teams
paper,
where the drivers are relatively even, and then there are some teams where at the moment they're not. And on paper, Alex Albon has more experience. He has outperformed Logan every time. And Logan, I think, took it as like a champ. He took it in the best way that he possibly could.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, he probably understands this is the best decision for the team. And yeah, it sucks that he has to give his car up to his teammate, and it sucks that people were saying that he was, quote unquote, being punished for something that he didn't do. But like, I'm sure that this is probably something that they have discussed as a team in the past. Like when they went, knowing that they didn't have a spare chassis.
This is Plan Z.
This is like, they hope that this never happens, but if something happens where Alex did crash his car and wasn't able to fix it, then at the end of the day, it makes more sense statistically for Alex to take the car.
I do think, too, a lot of people were doing a comparison of Zhou's crash in the prior race when his mechanics rebuilt the car between practice sessions. But I think the other thing with that is every crash is different. Every crash damage, well,
that's the thing. I think Alex's survival pod was not up to snuff after his crash, where Zhou's was.
And, like, that's the thing is that I think to compare that's ludicrous to compare crashes and be like, if Sauber could do it, why can't Williams? You don't know. You don't know what the crash reports look like. So it definitely sucked. I think it put a bummer on Williams as a whole for the weekend. I think morale was probably not at an all-time high.
And to make it even more awkward, it was Alex's birthday.
Yeah, there was a lot of, it's Alex's birthday, and he got gifted Logan's car jokes. But, yeah, so FP3, the only note I have for FP3 was that both Red Bull drivers were complaining about their brakes.
Which is not the end of the complaint.
Which I thought was really interesting.
One of the other things just to comment on for the free practice sessions, there wasn't really a huge difference between soft and medium tires for for lap speed.
Yeah.
So one of the sessions, whoever was top of the charts, I think, set that on a medium tire. I couldn't remember what it was, or it was like it took a really long time for someone to actually put up a faster lap than the one on the medium tire on a soft. It was taking them like many laps to really get the soft tire heated up to the speed that they needed it to be, where with the medium it was a lot faster, weirdly enough. So that was just something strange that everyone was taking note of.
Yeah.
So
Let's practice.
on to quali. So for qualifying, I figured we could start off with Q1.
Really? I
Yeah.
want to start with 2. Like,
No, let's just start with Q3. Let's just go to the end. Just tell you what happened. No, okay. So obviously because Logan Sargent isn't driving, there's only 19 cars on the grid. And I will say the one thing that I wasn't fully understanding about the whole Logan Alex switch situation was, are they taking parts from Logan's car and rebuilding Alex's, or are they like
Literally.
just refitting the seat for Alex into Logan's car? I didn't really understand that. Anyways, we'll figure that out and we'll tell you guys more about that later. Okay, so Q1, we see Nico, Pierre, Daniel, and Joe out. I do think Nico probably would have made it onto Q2 if he wasn't impeded by Checo, which I will explain a bit more about Checo's consequences for that later. Any other notes that you have on Q1?
I have a few. So we saw George start to complain about brake issues, and I thought that this was something really important to note because we had just heard Red Bull complaining about brake issues. Now we have Mercedes complaining about brake issues. So I think there was like 1 or 2 other drivers that were complaining about brake issues. Max was complaining about understeering. And then a driver we haven't talked about yet this episode, I feel like Danny Ricciardo is struggling to find his footing. I feel like it's a nice
Yeah,
possible.
there's been people from Red Bull or RB that have made comments being like he is having a hard time adjusting to the car.
Yeah, so we saw Danny move to 10th, and then Yuki moved up to 7th, and that's one comment that is kind of being brought up a lot is the outperformance of Yuki compared to Danny. But then we saw Danny's time get deleted because of track limits, and so he went down into 18th.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer, you know?
Especially with his hometown. Grand Prix.
Like, yeah, it's...
This was kind of the season for him to show everyone that he still has it.
Yeah,
there are rumors
that if his performance doesn't improve in the next few races, that there might be a possibility that Liam Lawson can be put in the car. I would really hope, based off of kind of
the relationship?
The relationship Red Bull has, RB has with Ricciardo, but also I think, I don't know because we weren't watching Formula One as closely when Nick DeVries got pulled out of the car, but I feel like, and granted, I get it that RB is not going to make decisions based off of the fans. I don't expect a company to make decisions, but I feel like people were really upset about it. Like, people thought it was kind of...
You haven't given him even a full season to show if he's good enough.
I'm just a little nervous. Granted, it might just be clickbait from the internet, but I just feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like the general public didn't really like it.
Yeah.
And
I feel like it's looked down upon.
Yeah, and to do it to the guy that you, like...
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a few issues with it. Joe complained of damage and had front wing damage around turn 10 at one point, and then just a few more notes. Ocon moves to Q2, which I believe this is the first race of the season that Alpine moved on to Q2, and they played Esteban's radio message, like
really
when
sweet.
And the way they were cheering, and then the way the F1 pundits kind of made fun of the cheering, like, that is such a morale booster for a team. Yeah. Like, I don't care if they're cheering like they just won the Super Bowl, like they just won the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, it's
like,
huge for them.
Let them be like, shut up and let them be happy.
Yeah.
So those were kind of my notes, and then Perez impeded Hulkenberg. Yeah, but whatever. Are we surprised?
There's at least every race, like, there's always one person who impedes.
Yeah, and I feel
And
like there's always a
sometimes-
qualifying impeding. There's
It's always a qualifying and
qualifying.
competing, and only sometimes are they penalized for it.
Yeah, love the consistency.
Q2. So we see Lewis, Alex, Valtteri, K-Mag, and Esteban out. This is, again, I'm not going to say the beginning of Lewis's struggles. I think this whole season is just going to struggle for him, and I think it's going to be a struggle for him.
I don't think it's going to be a great Mercedes.
And I don't think the comments that Toto Wolff is making right now, being like, you're gonna regret going to Ferrari, like, you're like, I hope you get used to seeing, like, the back of, like, our rear wing. It's not good. I feel... Don't look into next season right now, Toto and Lewis. Feel content right now and focus on the current season.
I also just feel like, talking about team morale, I feel like Mercedes, like...
is really bad right now.
They're just tripping. And not just with the car, but, like, across the board. Like, it feels like Lewis made this Ferrari announcement and, like, Mercedes is just shell-shocked. Like, I feel like they're just, like... a little bit going through the emotions.
Like, yeah, because Toto has made comments also about how they're hoping that, like, if Max wants to, like, jump ship and come over, and I just am like, don't give up on Max. It's not going to happen. Lewis is moving on. You guys need to find someone else.
I think for me, and again... maybe it's just, like, the way these things are being clipped for, like, in
probably.
But they're not meshing from the outside looking in. It just seems awkward.
It doesn't look healthy.
I feel like I'm really surprised because...
It's upsetting to watch because last year, if you had asked me, like, team morale-wise, what team I wanted to be on... I would have said Mercedes. It looked like the most healthy, positive, not toxic environment ever to live in. Right now, I would not say that at all.
I feel like their focus, and I don't want to say their focus isn't on the car and on this season. It just feels like...
they haven't moved on from the announcement.
From the announcement, yeah. And it's kind of like, it is what it is. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps and, like...
figure out what's wrong with your car.
Yeah, like, focus on the now.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm not surprised that all of the movement is causing, like this, like, distraction, I want to say. I don't want to say distract because it's part of the sport, but, like, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're trying to figure their shit out. Yeah. It's just they're not doing it well.
Yeah. I think that's all I really had on Q2.
Yuki and Lance, right at the last moment, jumped out of the elimination zone, which is what ended up pushing Lewis out. Yeah, my last comment on Mercedes, I'm just curious why George is outperforming. Like, why Lewis is struggling with the car so much. Is George struggling as much? Because I feel like we've just been hearing a lot about Lewis, and honestly, I feel like we haven't heard a lot about George.
We haven't heard.
The only thing I've heard about George is he's gonna be the new team leader. Okay, we get that. Like, no shit.
Yeah, what are his opinions on the car?
Like, I want to know why he's outperforming.
Like, so much.
So much. Yeah. That's all I have for Q2.
Okay, so Q3, we see the top three originally were Max, Carlos, and Checo, but Checo got a not 22nd. He got oh my gosh. No, he would be in the back of the grid.
Yeah. The race hasn't even started.
He got a grid place penalty, so he was moved back to starting P7, I think it was. Let me double check. P6. So he was supposed to start P3. He got moved back to P6. So then the starting order was now Max, Carlos, Lando, Charles, Oscar, Checo, George, Yuki, Lance, and Fernando. So that's all I have on Q3.
Yeah, I just have a few. Fernando pits because of a big runoff. Oscar requests his team to review left side. And Charles says the car started to drive. That's all I have.
Yeah, I think between Charles and Carlos, Charles is the one struggling more with the car this year.
Yeah, but
it's reminding me of post-summer break last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Less, though. Like, I feel like post-summer break was, like, they were a little bit more messy.
Yeah.
I feel like they struggled with the car more.
Yeah,
I feel like they're not struggling as much, or at least we're not hearing about it because there's other teams that cannot figure their cars out.
That's it for quali for me. On to the race.
Yeah. So, while we've only been at Albert Park since the 90s, this was the 40th year of the Australian GP, which I thought was pretty cool. It changed locations a few times. I don't know, a few times. 1 or 2 times. I don't know. But that was, like, a pretty important part of the beginning of the race, was the fact that, like, history, man. You know how I love my F1 history. Logan was interviewed prior to the race, and honestly, I thought he was as eloquent as one could get.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, there's a lot of team support, so that was nice to see. And then we found out that Zhao was starting in the pit lane. Zhou, thank you. Zhou was starting in the pit lane because of a new front wing. He had complained about possible damage, I believe, in qualifying. So he had to replace that and start in the pit lane. Juan Pablo Montoya was also interviewed prior to the race starting. We haven't spoken about him, but he's a pretty important person in the F1 world, obviously. And he was impressed with Logan's professionalism. Like, I think that goes to show, like, people were really impressed with Logan this weekend. And I want to, like, reiterate, like, he could have taken this so differently.
Oh, yeah. I mean, literally a quote from Max was, if that were me, I would have crashed my car because then nobody gets to race. When I saw that quote, I was like, Max?
That's crazy talk.
That's not just crazy. That is so immature, petty, and inappropriate.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, that is a risk that even though you may win everything, that is a risk that as a business, I don't think I would want to take.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it was just, like, a knee-jerk thing to say. Like, It
was definitely not media trained.
Yeah, the PR team was scrambling.
Yeah.
So, honestly, the start was impeccable.
Yeah, I was a little nervous.
There was no collisions.
Yeah.
I don't even think that there was, like, love taps.
No.
Like, it was clean. And then lap 2...
we start to see Carlos gain a bit on Max. And this is when I was like, I'm awake.
Well, and so that was the thing. For those that have been watching, we have seen Max pull away. By lap 2, he's already, I think we've seen 7 seconds.
And so, like when we see a car stick with him for more than, like, a lap or 2...
it's crazy.
It's like, let's go. This is going to be a good fight.
So, Carlos, in lap 2... past Max.
Mm-hmm.
And
at turn 9.
It was insane. Then
we start to see smoke from Max's
around
car.
lap 4. He is like, we couldn't tell if it was smoke or if it was like pickup.
Well, at first, before the smoke started to happen, he was complaining about issues with the car.
He was like, it was loose.
And we were like, stop complaining, Max. Like, get over it.
But then it starts to smoke.
And then we're like, okay, you can complain.
And it starts to smoke bad. So he's able to get it back into the pit lane at glacial pace.
Yeah, because then
his car is smoking.
He's then on the dirty side of the track as he's getting back to the pit lane. All the cars are passing him. I hate to say it, but we were like, let's go! This is awesome! Like,
it was, I think it was like, it was the way, I hate to say it was the way we felt about Singapore. It was like, we're gonna get a race. Like, we're gonna get a race
It was like growing up and watching someone, like, beat the Patriots. It's like, this is the best day ever.
Yeah. He ends up pulling into the pit lane, and immediately the fire marshals are at his car. So there are fire marshals in the pit lane because these fire vehicles, gasoline, or whatever they use, their special blend. Yeah. So the fire marshals run to the car.
It's a really cool slow-mo shot of his rear brakes on fire as he's pulling in, which obviously not safe for him. Visually, absolutely insane.
Well, F1 shoves their cameras in there, and his car, I think it was his rear right tire.
Yeah.
it is just melting. Which, like, for me, I'm like, holy shit, that level of heat near Max, number one.
Yeah, scary.
He sprinted out of that car.
Well,
And
they
then
have to do, I know in IndyCar they do it, and I'm sure in F1 they do it. They have to do, like, emergency tests. Like, they have to be able to get in and out of the car in like, it's like 4 seconds or something like that.
I mean, it makes sense. We had to flip the boat and get back in.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's all about safety. But
It's like a fire drill for the car.
yeah, his brakes just
Went poof.
went poof. So that was
was it
crazy.
for him.
So that was it. So
At
literally,
first, before you even saw that it had, like, completely melted, the pundits were like, he's going into the pit. Maybe the engineers can fix it and he can get back out there. And then they put the camera on the brake and they're like, never mind.
they're like,
he's not coming back out.
back. So
On to Carlos.
lap 5, Max officially retired from the race.
That was a long pause.
I don't know why I paused. I was reading my notes.
It was
Sorry.
really dramatic.
That was really dramatic because I got confused because I wrote something. Chris, my husband, made a joke that Perez was going to pit so that Max could then get into Perez's car, pull a Williams. Obviously, that did not happen.
It would have been funny.
As this is happening, eventually, you know, it's just like it was disbelief that he retired. So Carlos is in the lead, and then a little bit later on, Oscar and Charles end up pitting, and Lando and Carlos don't. So Lando and Carlos are trying to, I don't know.
For a while, we thought that Lando was going to be able to stay close to Carlos, but, like, the actual race pace of the Ferrari compared to the McLaren at the current moment, the Ferrari is just so much faster.
Yeah.
The McLaren can keep up to an extent.
But the DEG really affects it.
Yeah.
I feel like...
I think the McLaren has a faster race pace than most other... Like, if it comes to race pace, based on the past few races, it's going to be Red Bull has the best race pace, then Ferrari, then McLaren. But then there's, like, a big drop-off after that. It's, like, Aston and Mercedes, like, we don't really... Their race pace, it just depends on what's going on, where they start, stuff like that. McLaren's race pace, I think that's the thing that they're probably going to be working on for the rest of the season, because they cannot keep up with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls.
They lose it, and they get stuck by their lonesome. Like, I feel like they end up, like, literally just, like, Oscar and Lando...
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
By themselves.
Yeah, so we start to see Carlos just walk away from Lando.
Yeah. So, lap 13, Checo complains about tire grip and is dropping. Like, he's just dropping. Like, I don't know. I think they started him on... I don't know what they...
Most of them started on between mediums and hards, I believe.
He was not happy with it. And then he ended up pitting... But lap 15, 16, when he came out of the pit lane, he was in front of Lewis, and it was a very close call.
A lot of the, like, pit lane exits this weekend were really close.
Tight, yeah.
Yeah, because people were coming out in traffic no matter what.
Yeah. George then, a little bit further down the track, ends up passing Gasly, which, no surprise, Alpine just is not.
Just a struggle.
And then, lap 17... Lewis Hamilton has engine failure. Yeah. His car just stops. It just stops.
Yeah, you see his onboard, and you can hear the engine just stop.
We knew they were going to have engine problems. Lap 1,
from the beginning of the race, all the Mercedes cars have had problems with their engines, so...
A big bummer. I mean, the nice thing was like, he pulled over in the perfect spot. Like, I love when they do that. They removed the car so fast.
The pundits were like, this might be a red flag or, like, a virtual safety car. And they're like, oh.
It's just the yellow flag.
It's off already.
Yeah.
It's
so,
done.
I feel like that just kind of, like, heightens the Mercedes frustration.
Yeah.
It just kind of... It just feels like they keep tripping over themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it really does. The green flag, ended up flying after one lap, and then basically it just stayed with Sainz, Leclerc, Piastri, and Norris in the top 4.
Yeah, and like they all switched around just depending on when people were pitting and stuff like that. And I feel like if there was action on the grid, it was usually just because someone had pitted and they're trying to make their way back up to the front. And other than that, I just don't think that there was anything like super crazy going on.
I think one thing I do want to just comment on is Sauber's pit stop.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, that's like the one. Well, before we get there.
Okay.
People were saying that this is a boring race because we didn't have like battles on the track. People were like, you can't say that Max makes the races boring because he wasn't in this race and this one was boring. I don't think that this race was boring. Yes, Carlos pulled ahead and was ahead by like 7 seconds the majority of the race. But like, I don't think
2.3 seconds.
Because he pitted because of his like last pit stop. For a while there, he was like 7 seconds ahead though. But I feel like the majority of the race was interesting in the sense that like we didn't. Yes, we knew that Carlos was gonna win unless something severe happened. There was the likelihood that Charles was going to come in second, but like Lando was catching up to Charles for a while and vice versa whenever they had pit stops. Oscar was trying to figure out his race pace. And then there was a bunch going on in the middle of the grid, which is pretty typical. I feel like there's usually a lot going on in the middle. But like as a fan of like Lando and Carlos, I feel like I was only really paying attention to them. But typically I would pay attention more to the middle of the pack. Like I probably should have paid more attention to see like where Alex Albon was because I usually do. But this race I was just like, Carlos, go.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too is like the grid is fairly close right now.
Yeah.
Like it's close and teams are only going to improve.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like no one's willing to take the risks. I think that safety is so important right now in the sport and promoting.
Which is understandable.
Which is needed. But, yeah, I just feel like sometimes, like, the sport is evolving. Is this the new normal?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So, Alpine had a horrible pit stop, and then we ended up finding out that Ocon had a tear-off in his duct. So that kind of explained it.
Which he actually posted an Instagram photo with the tear-off.
With the tear-off, people requested fingerprinting to determine which driver it was. Alpine, let us know if you're looking into that. I do not have the lap of Valtteri's
or the time
pit stop or the time.
It happened for Valtteri and Joe, I'm pretty sure. It happened for both of them.
So Sauber just...
Again.
Their downfall right now
are their pit stops.
Is their pit stops. I mean, they're like a minute long.
And considering how slow their car is, that's where they need to be on top of everything because there's only so much you can do for your car right now. Like, your pit stops have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And so every single race that we've had so far, they've had at least one, like, 50-second pit stop, which is insanity.
It's so much time. It's like so much time.
I'm pretty sure they said that they added up the times of all the other drivers' pit stops and combined them, and they still didn't even add up to one of the Sauber pit stops.
And like the thing is that like these are like the pit stop crews. It is very physically demanding. I mean, we all see what they're doing. And it's the same
thing that it's
this
it's
freaking
one of
wheel
the
gun.
Left rear wheel nut and the gun associated with it. It is not working.
I thought it was one of the right tires for him this time. One of the front tires.
I thought it was a rear.
I don't know. Anyways, it's happening to his tires.
Yeah, and apparently, they tried to, like, remodel the wheel nut to see if they can have a faster pit stop, and it's not working, obviously.
Apparently, it's stripping,
yeah.
Like, the
people were saying that
drills.
They saw, like, a close-up photo of it, and it was just absolutely stripped. Like, there was no thread on it whatsoever. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I hope they improve.
3 races in a row is insane. For it to happen once is insane. For it to happen 3 times is unacceptable. So,
and like those teams practice so much,
and
those guys do so much, and to like see the tools that they use fail them.
Yeah.
Like, that's what's really upsetting.
Well, and for the drivers, too, I was watching this one interview where Checo and Max were both saying, you, as a driver, can tell the difference between a 1.8 to 2 second pit stop and a 2.5 second pit stop. You can literally feel that half a second difference. It feels like you're sitting there forever. A 50-second pit stop, I cannot imagine. Like, you're watching the race just go past you.
Well, and, like, the adrenaline, like, the way it must, like, you just,
it's how can you catch up?
It's such a bummer.
Yeah.
Like, mentally, you're just like, well, shit.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely been a point of issue for everyone, especially the team that it's affecting. And it's, again, I think it's just, for me, it sucks because we know how much time these guys, these teams, because I don't want to say guys, women and men, these teams
put into all their work.
Put into it, and that it's failing them. It's just...
It sucks to see.
Yeah. So, Checo ends up, around lap 21, he ends up passing George. And then, honestly, I have a note. Lap 24, can we stop seeing Max walk around?
Yeah, they just kept showing videos of Max walking around the paddock.
F1 TV, guys...
I don't really care that he's walking around. It's kind of like, I don't really care. If you're in the lead by more than a couple seconds, I don't want to see you.
Yeah, unless something...
I know you're winning. I don't need to see anything else.
And then, kind of my last note, because I feel like the grid kind of settled. Oscar had a spin out. Not a spin out. I think like an over or under steer that put him into grass, which I think was why he ended up falling back.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of timing, a bit more. He wasn't as close with Lando. And then lap 58, so I don't know if Carlos had crossed the finish line yet at this point, but George had a pretty bad crash. Honestly, since I've been watching, it was probably one of the most stressful, like, initial crash. But what ended up happening was...
I would say between Lance last year and this one, those were, like, the worst ones to watch.
Did he fully flip? Did George fully flip?
I don't think he, like, rolled. He, like, flipped. It was, like
half, to the side.
Yeah.
So his car is, obviously not laying the way a car should lay, and he's stuck.
It was, like, on one of the tires.
He's stuck in the middle of the track, and
Well, so he was racing with Fernando.
Yes.
He was trying to pass Fernando, and... George claims that Fernando brake checked him, and he braked too early for the turn that they were coming up on. Watching Fernando's onboard, it doesn't look like that's what happened. It looks like they were actually having some like gearbox issues or engine issues. I couldn't remember which one, but it doesn't look like Fernando intentionally tried to stop or brake check him. But because of that, whatever happened, George kind of fumbled and ended up going into the wall, and ended up flipping a little bit, but like halfway. So one of his tires was underneath the bottom of his car, so he was still mostly upright, but like was not really.
And you just hear the radio.
The radio message was probably one of the scariest radio messages because he is in the middle of the track. Thank God, I think it was Lance Stroll was behind him by, like, at least 10 seconds. Thank God Lance is behind him by so far because that gave Lance's engineer enough time to be like, George's in the middle of the track, like, slow down, like, there's debris, go to the left immediately so that Lance did not hit him. If there was cars directly behind him, I don't think George would have walked away from that.
I don't know if... I don't want to say he would have died. Like, I think it would have been really, really horrible. I don't want to even think about that. Like, I think it would have been so damaging.
It probably would have been the worst one
we've ever
we have seen in a long that like F1 has seen in a long time.
I think the other thing is too is just like it goes to show you the speed and the efficiency that these teams, not only at the race but also back at the factory, all the people looking at the data, warning the. It just shows you the impeccable, focus that everyone has. That, like, yes, the 10 seconds did help, but I think also just, the engineers really communicating to their drivers, making it, like, that is what makes the sport safe.
Yeah.
is that ability to communicate.
Well, and so his radio message, he immediately, I don't
like,
think
red
he even
flag,
says,
red
like,
flag,
I'm
red
okay. He
flag.
just says, red flag, like, I'm in the middle of the track, red flag. And you hear the absolute panic in his voice. They ended up not red flagging it and putting out a virtual safety car. I've seen some people debate about this. I think the reason why they didn't put out a red flag is because it was the last lap of the race, and so everyone would have had to go past him anyways to get into the pit. So a red flag wouldn't have been any different than a virtual safety car in this situation. So the best I think that they could do was what they had done. Just tell the drivers to go in a specific spot. I don't think that they necessarily need to do that cool down lap. But I think they had to because actually they did have to because the pit lane is after, the pit lane is before, the pit lane entrance is before the finish line.
Yeah.
So in order, they have to finish first and then do the cool down lap and then go into the pit. Luckily everyone is okay. But Fernando did end up getting a 20-second penalty afterwards. We find out like 24 hours later. There's a lot of people that are not happy about it. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. But we also don't see the data. From a fan perspective, watching his onboard, it doesn't look like it was necessarily a fair call. It was an inconsistent call from the FIA. And then it also just, I think, it discourages drivers from trying to race and defend. I think right now with the way that rules have been, it's a really hard line of trying to figure out how much is defending and how much is unsafe.
Well, I think that's the problem, is that the FIA is sitting here and they're preaching a level of safety, which is great. It's what's needed in any sport.
Yeah.
These are human beings. These are souls that are doing these jobs. And so, but the problem is that things are too gray. Things are too gray, and so it's again, I talk about it, I feel like every few races, it's the inconsistency.
Yeah.
It's the fact that who determined that it was 20 seconds?
Yeah.
Why was it 20 and not 10?
I agree.
Like, that's my issue, is that, are you just slapping a sticker on it? Like I don't feel like there's not enough layers of, okay, you'll get a 5-second penalty if you do this. Okay, well, if you do this plus this, you get it,
Yeah.
Again, I also haven't read the FIA handbook. I don't know how hard set their rules are. It's just frustrating.
I think a lot, knowing that so many people within the F1 world were kind of
we're
like, what?
upset about it, yeah.
I think that also just makes it kind of like, I don't really understand it, so. But yeah, that was the race. Let's get into our final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, Lindsay?
So my final takeaways, and I feel like 2 of them we've discussed, so I'll just say them. So Sauber and their pit stops.
Yeah.
Guys, Sauber and their pit stops.
Nothing else to add there.
It's giving me anxiety. It's stressing me out. Mercedes, poor Mercedes. I feel like as a team they just need a hug or like a cup of hot chocolate. Like or like a weekend retreat. Like,
I almost just don't want to hear from them right now. I think
they're in the doghouse for you.
I think the statements to the media can get really toxic really quickly. I think they need to take a step back. They need to stop talking to the media. They need to
have a barbecue.
They need to reevaluate within themselves
just talk things out
and figure it out in the factory and talk to each other. I think the talking to the media and the talking about who's going to be in that seat next year needs to stop. I think it's really unhealthy.
I also think it's like, I don't want to say it's hypocritical. I think it's like really frustrating because they went into this season being like,
we're focusing on this season.
We know that Lewis is leaving, but, we're going to focus on making it his best last season. And it's like, where did those perspectives go? And granted, I am not a great person when I'm frustrated, when I'm angry, but it's just like, it just feels awkward. Yeah. But anyways. And then finally, my other point was, because we didn't talk about it at all, Haas in the freaking points.
Both of them.
Like, oh my god, K-Mag and Nico, like snaps.
Honestly.
Props. Amazing.
Remember when we started the season and at their car launch, Io was like, yeah, we're going to have the worst car on the grid, but we're just going to go into the season knowing that. They do not have the worst car on the grid whatsoever.
I don't know what they're doing over there, but...
I don't know if this is, like, because the car, Io didn't, like, yeah, Io was on the team last year, but he wasn't the team principal last year, and he only became team principal in, like, January, so the car that they're driving right now has been in development for a while. I don't know if it's just, like, a change of leadership has helped them greatly, but it's interesting. And then to add to that, Gunther Steiner doing the post-race interviews.
Charles Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc. I'm sorry. How do you not understand a German accent?
You're like, I could understand him, and maybe it was the crowd. Maybe it was the crowd. He couldn't hear. I don't know, but it was so awkward.
It's right after the race. I'm sure he's probably tired.
He's out of breath. I
would be zoning out. But, like...
It was painful.
You're acting like you've never spoken to a German person before. You're from Monaco.
It was crazy. Did you also see what the Miami GP announced?
Oh, he's the...
Gunther Steiner is, like, the official ambassador
I love that so much
of the Miami GP.
I think that's so funny.
But, yeah, it was, like... we sat there watching the post-race interviews, and again...
It was kind of wholesome, Carlos talking to him. I kind of really enjoyed it. Like, even Lando talking to him, I was like, this is kind of nice that they're talking to him. But Charles just seemed confused, like, more than normal.
Like, it almost was like Charles had never met him before.
Yeah.
Like...
It was like Charles didn't know who he was.
I don't know. It was really... That was the only part of the post-race interviews that I was confused by.
Because Gunther asks Charles a question, and Charles is like, huh? And then there's a long pause, and then Gunther re-says it, but in a different way, in a shorter way. And then Charles answers. It was just like...
It was giving the same energy as, you know that old clip of the guy who just, like, he asked the questions, it's, like, 45 seconds long, and all the drivers are like, what was the question?
Yes.
That was the energy. It was, like, he got lost in the question. But... it was all innocent fun. I don't know. It was like, dude.
I will say, one of my favorite parts of the weekend, I think, just seeing a Ferrari win is so exciting because the Italian national anthem, man.
They're so proud.
They love their country so much, and seeing all the Ferrari employees, like, singing it and being so happy, I was like, I might shed a tear.
Well, I also think... it's really... I mean, granted, we're only 3 races in, so, like, obviously the point standings, like, will change significantly. Yeah. But Red Bulls, right now, they're at 97 points, and Ferrari is at 93.
I feel like this is going to be... because the 2022 season, Charles was... he came in second in the constructors... in the Drivers' Championship. And last year, he obviously did not... I think it would be really interesting to see how it plays out this year. I have a feeling that this year is going to be a lot more like 2022 than 2023. So at least as of right now.
As of right now, Charles is already in second. He did pass Checo. Checo didn't have a great performance this weekend, to be really honest. He was having issues with his car, but it didn't burst into flames. But he was 56 seconds behind Carlos, which it's like... normally, the Red Bull gap at the end of the race is, like, 20 seconds on everyone.
Yeah.
So, he did get past. He's now in third, but there's a point between Checo and Charles. There's one point.
Well, and Carlos is in fourth in the standings, and he missed a race.
Yeah, Carlos is in fourth with 40 points right now.
That's, like, the wild part. There's a photo of him and Lando after the race, and, like, Carlos has his shirt lifted up, and he has a bandage on his stomach because he just had surgery.
It's his appendix. It's a keyhole operation. He's fine.
I mean, but the G-force is, like, pressing down on that. Probably doesn't feel that great.
Well, he did come out, and because everyone was asking him, they were like, are you going to be in the car this weekend? And he was like, I'm going to go into practice, and if it doesn't feel good, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to keep racing. Like, that's the other thing, is that, like, I feel like he is confident enough in himself that he's like, I can't race.
Yeah. My respect and appreciation for Carlos, I mean, I think I've always really liked him as a driver, but over the last, the few races this season, I have grown a huge respect for him because he went into the season knowing that he's not going to have a seat next year
He's
at
still
Ferrari.
jobless.
He still doesn't have a job. That was one of the things that he said. He was like, well, I still don't have a job next year, so this might help a little bit.
I also, in a post-race interview, it's been all over TikTok. It's been all over just everywhere. They interviewed Charles, Carlos, and Lando, and they asked, what was the question?
So they asked
Why
him, do you think that Carlos is an underrated driver?
And I feel like that one...
I think it goes to show that a lot of people do underrate him.
Yeah, I think for me, I was taken aback by the question, but I think...
I don't think the drivers find him, underrate him. I think a lot of the fans underrate him. I think a lot of Ferrari fans underrate him.
Well, Charles is, the child of Ferrari.
Yeah, il predestinato.
I think Carlos, I just thinking about all the teams he's been on, all the teammates he is just so adaptable.
He was at Renault, did well at Renault, and then he got replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. Went to McLaren then because he didn't have a spot anymore. So then went to McLaren. Was there for 2 years. Did a great job. Then, again, got replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. Now goes to Ferrari. Does a phenomenal job.
Gets replaced by Lewis Hamilton.
He keeps getting replaced by these drivers who historically have great resumes. The last 3 years, not good. Not great, at least. I am interested to see how Lewis does next year at Ferrari. There was a lot of talk about people being like, I wonder if Fred Vasseur is going to regret signing Lewis Hamilton and getting rid of Carlos Sainz. I don't know if that's necessarily true, honestly. I mean, if you have a chance to sign a 7-time world champion, it makes sense why you would do it. But I think that Carlos deserves a seat at a top team and deserves to stay there. I think he deserves to be the number one on the team because he's a consistently great driver. He's his own strategist, and I think that he can drive any kind of car because now he's been on 4 teams and he's driven 4 different kinds of cars.
I think I'm just shocked at, how often he's been replaced.
It's weird.
And how, it does seem to be these, these things that happen, and he's like, oh, okay. He does roll with the punches.
Yeah.
And, that is the other thing. Talking about Logan's professionalism, Carlos is, and that's the thing. Let's look at Ferrari, who Carlos understands he got looked over for Lewis. But look at what Ferrari is doing compared to Mercedes.
Yeah.
Where Mercedes is falling apart.
Ferrari.
Because of, and I do feel
Carlos won a race.
For a team that, and it's, you have to.
And they were so happy for him.
And that's the thing is that, I just feel like there is so much respect that people have for him. Even his father, I feel like, I don't know. I think I'm just shocked that he is constantly looked over.
Yeah.
Did you see the Red Bull rumors?
So, yes, I did. So the Red Bull rumors are that potentially Carlos is going to have Checo's seat next year at Red Bull. Max and Carlos were teammates on Toro Rosso back in the day. Rumor has it that it was not a healthy relationship.
Oh, really?
That it was very toxic, that it was not healthy whatsoever. And I believe that the way that Max likes his cars is different than what Carlos likes. So I just don't know. At the same time, Carlos seems to be a very adaptable driver.
That's also how many years ago was that?
Yeah, they were young.
They were really...
They were teenagers.
Yeah.
So who knows? We'll see what happens. I think that it would make more sense for him to go to Aston. I don't want him at Mercedes, given how Mercedes has been. I think I could see, if Fernando stays, I could see Fernando moving from Aston to Mercedes, just because. Why not? And then I could see them, the only driver I could see Aston wanting that's currently on the grid would be Carlos.
I don't know where everyone's going to fall.
Because to me, it makes most sense.
Like, guys, just announce it. Just, like...
Well, we'll wait till silly season. Everyone will announce it during the summer, so.
Yeah. I just don't know where everyone's gonna land. I really don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that is it for today.
All right. On that note.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.